Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Geeta Suri, Associate Dean of the Robert B. Willemstad School of Business at Adelphi University, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first Dawn Center Speaker Series event this fall. And today's topic is cybersecurity in the workforce, best practices and lessons learned, a topic I think that all companies are really concerned about today. The session will be moderated by Professor Kees Luna. Our speakers today are Ms. Barbara Porter, Mr. Christos Tolumba, and Ms. Kelly Del Sorbo. Professor Luna is an associate professor and chair of the Department of Mathematics and Computer Science at Adelphi University. Thank you, Professor Luna, for serving as today's moderator. Now, I'll turn Emily DiRupo will introduce the moderator and speakers for today's session. She is a senior majoring in management at Adelphi and a part of the Willemstad's Leadership Scholars Program and president of the Professional Business Fraternity, Delta Sigma Pi. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Dr. Suri. It is my pleasure to introduce the moderator and speakers for today's session. Our moderator for today's session is Professor Kees Luna. Professor Luna is an associate professor and the chair of Department of Mathematics and Computer Science at Adelphi University. He also serves as the Information Security Officer of Adelphi's Information Security team. Our first speaker is Ms. Barbara Porter. She has spent the last 13 plus years with Fragrance.com and currently serves as its Chief Operating Officer and Chief Technology Officer. Her 35-year career also includes roles with 1-800-Flowers.com, Getty Petroleum Corp., Global Computer Supplies. Barbara has a Bachelor in Science in Computer Science from the New York Technology, MBA from University of Massachusetts Amherst, and she's in her final semester for a Master of Science in Cybersecurity from NYU. Congratulations. Our next speaker is Mr. Christos Tolumba. He brings over 20 years of experience in cybersecurity, having progressed through roles from security analyst and engineer to CISO. Demonstrating a solid track record, Christos has adeptly developed and overseen security programs, ensuring they align with enterprise standards while accommodating specific business requirements. He also has a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from New York Institute of Technology, and he holds CISSP, CISM, and CEH certifications. Our next speaker is Kelly Del Sorbo. She is a senior consultant in the financial services practice at Ernst & Young, based in the firm's Boston office. Kelly has over 6 years of insurance industry experience with a focus on management of liability products. Kelly has worked with various clients in the insurance and banking sector to help execute strategic transformation projects that incorporate product development, project management, and underwriting. Professor Luna, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Emily. Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Kees Luna. I'll be moderating today's session. We're fortunate to have a really great team of panelists who can share their insights on cybersecurity. However, before we start today, I'd like to remind the audience that the panelists are speaking as industry experts. They are not representing their current employers. Having said that, let's get started. I think I would like to start with asking the panelists just to give us a brief introduction of who you are, maybe an overview of your career progression, and then maybe as a final comment, tell us what you would like to be known for. Barbara.
Okay, so let's see. So it's funny. Just before the call started, Kelly was mentioning how she had an atypical path into cybersecurity, and my whole career has been atypical, quite honestly. I was involved in and enamored with technology very young. For those old enough to remember, I had the very first IBM PC. Back in 1980 or 81 it was, and that was actually my second computer. So I've been involved with computers for a very long time. However, that's not where my college career took me initially, and I ended up working in accounting and procurement and a little bit in environmental services and just things that had nothing to do at all with computers or cybersecurity. And I realized that, my draw to computers was probably where I was going to be happiest professionally. So that's when I returned to school, went and got my computer science degree. Once I did that and I did move into technology roles, I realized, having been on the business side of things for many years professionally, that there was a huge disconnect between business and the people who provided technology services, and they didn't always work well together or communicate well together. And I saw an opportunity for myself to kind of, play in that space. So went back and got my MBA, moved into more senior roles, and over time, actually, that also led to me moving into operational roles, because I leveraged technology in my company to help us operate more effectively and efficiently. So my career just keeps taking turns in different ways, and I'm just along for the ride. What do I want to be remembered for? I think I want to be remembered as somebody who, made a difference, both, professionally, for the companies I worked for, but also, on a personal level. I think it's important to enjoy what you do, but to provide value, in various ways, and not just with the work you do.
Excellent. Thank you. And just maybe a shameless plug in the reaction to some of the comments that you made. The bridge between business and technology is something that keeps on coming back over and over and over. Delphi is offering an undergraduate Bachelor of Science in Information Systems. That is exactly what that degree is for, to bridge the gap between technologists and business-focused people. So if you're interested in something like that, check it out. Next, Christos, could you shine your light on your career progression?
Absolutely. So hi, everybody. My name is Christos Columba. I am the Chief Information Security Officer at a company called Veritas Technologies. I've been doing this for over 20 years. My career actually started pretty young, when I was about 14 years old. I got my first computer at a young age. Second the internet came out, I think my first inclination was to cause trouble and figure out, how to hack away. I've been doing that from a very, very young age. I was fortunate enough to be able to turn it into a career, right? So I went to college, 18 years old, got a computer science degree. Throughout my education, I spent a lot of time doing a lot of hands-on work, a lot of penetration testing for the school itself. I wound up becoming a security analyst right out of college. I had a job lined up and kind of worked my way up through the ranks, right? I became a security analyst, an engineer, penetration tester, threat modeling. Fast forward, 20 years later, this is my third go as a Chief Information Security Officer. I've worked in a multitude of industries, banking, healthcare, software, kind of been through it all. I'm one of those guys that just, kind of fortunate enough I do what I enjoy, right? I've been doing this for a very long time. I like to think I'm pretty good at it at this stage of my career. And I think it shows. I also do a lot of private equity consulting work for portfolio companies. I work, with mid-sized private equity groups, helping their smaller portfolio companies build cybersecurity programs, without investing as much as they really need to, right? I kind of look at it as kind of building out the foundation, helping guide their security program, and acting as an advisor in that capacity. What do I want to be known for? Honestly, I take a lot of pride in working with my team and my peers, getting them trained up, helping them throughout their career. And I hope, I'm looked at as a mentor, someone that's easy to work with, and someone that is passionate about the subject. To be perfectly honest, I don't really have any aspirations beyond that. I enjoy what I do. Hopefully I can continue to do that and continue to grow.
That is great advice. And I think it's true for any career, but in particular careers like the ones that we're discussing today. Your first requirement of being successful in that role is not necessarily the depth of your technical knowledge. It is passion for what you do. And so if you don't have the passion, it doesn't matter how much you know. And that's maybe an important part to bring out as well. Kelly.
Yeah. Hi, nice to meet you all. My name is Kelly Del Sorbo, and I just realized that Barbara and I are both alums of UMass Amherst. So I graduated from UMass with a degree in economics and communications. And prior to joining EY, I started out my career at Chubb Insurance, where I was an underwriter for private company management liability products, of which that included our cybersecurity product. And I was a part of their post-grad training program for about a year. and then transitioned into being a full-time underwriter for about 3 years after that. And for the last 2 years now, I've been working within the financial services practice at Ernst & Young, primarily focusing on business transformation work. And as many of you might know, so currently EY is part of one of the big four accounting firms. So we provide services in consulting, strategy and transactions, and assurance. And my primary focus is coming from my background on the insurance industry, focusing on property and casualty insurance clients. But in my time at EY, I've also worked with several clients in the banking industry as well. And some of the types of projects I've done include kind of helping clients, implement process improvements, helping to create new insurance products and rate plans, as well as helping clients upgrade products into new underwriting systems and help kind of continually evolve technology for clients. And in terms of what I want to be known for, I think being so early in my career, wanting to help educate others and educate myself kind of on the topic of cyber, whether that be risk management, cybersecurity, insurance, or kind of just anything in the insurance realm as well.
Excellent, thank you. Another atypical progression for the cybersecurity role. I love it. Okay, good. So thank you for letting us know a little bit about you. Next question is, can you elaborate a little bit about the company that you work for, what or the industry that you work in, whichever one you're most comfortable with discussing? What typical products and services would we expect to see in your industry and in your organization? Barbara.
Sure. So fragrance.com is the largest independent retailer of fragrances and related beauty items. The majority of our sales are online. We do about $350 million a year, US dollars, but we do ship internationally and we're growing quite aggressively internationally. A couple of years ago, before COVID, we started opening stores. During COVID, we took a pause on that, while we tried to figure out what retail would look like post-COVID. And last year we started re-entry into retail stores. So if you go to Roosevelt Field or the World Trade Center Mall or the Westchester Mall, we have stores in those locations where you can grab and go, any items you need right away. If you're willing to wait a couple of days, we'll ship it to you from our website. But that's what we're known for.
Thank you. Christos?
Sure. So Veritas Technologies is a data protection and enterprise resiliency company. What does that mean? In the world of ransomware, we're essentially the last stop, or the last level of protection against ransomware, right? We're trusted by, I think, about 80% of the Fortune 500 at this point, and 95% of Fortune 100 companies through a wide range of industries to help protect their critical infrastructure, their critical workloads. We make sure that data is available in the event of a ransomware attack. Storage is immutable, and we're one of the quickest to be able to restore that data when necessary. I think we're almost at 2 billion in revenue this year. Hopefully, we're going to continue to grow and continue to expand into additional services like software as a service, backup as a service. Anyway, so my role there is, like I said, I am the CISO there, which means I own all of our entire internal security program. I'm also responsible for our product level security and making sure that our critical workloads internally are protected, as well as our customers.
Thank you. Kelly?
Yeah, so I think I might have jumped ahead and already given some of this, but Ernst & Young is known for their work in accounting, strategy and transactions, consulting, and assurance services. I primarily fall into the consulting services realm, where we provide a range of services between business consulting, technology consulting, risk consulting, people advisory consulting, things like that. So kind of the whole spectrum of a business we can help clients with, whether that be helping to do risk assessments or help look at overall programs in place for cyber assessments, things like that. And my primary focus right now is in the kind of financial services realm. So that'll range from healthcare, insurance clients, banking, sort of anyone in the quasi-regulatory, regulated government space as well.
Excellent, thank you. So when we talk about cybersecurity in general, we usually have these different perspectives, right? Whether you're working in-house, whether you're working in a consulting role, or whether you're a technology provider. And it's very interesting to see that we have everyone represented on the call today. So that's great. It's going to give us a very much interesting perspectives on the questions that are coming up. Okay, so one of the things that we never lack of as people in security is challenges, is things that are happening that like we go, huh, haven't seen that before. And that's what makes the job really, really interesting, but it also makes it challenging at sometimes. Barbara, what do you think are the 2 or 3 biggest challenges that you see in your daily practice as a security leader?
Yeah, you know, the biggest challenge is honestly the people, in my opinion. You know, it still is not front of mind for most people in business. You know, gee, before I click on this link or before I open this email, you know, that's starting to change. But not enough, not fast enough. And, you know, people in an organization are generally the weakest point, you know, when it comes to cybersecurity. So that's really the biggest challenge, in my opinion. And then, you know, we do a lot of training of our employees all the way down to our warehouse staff. If your job requires you to use a connected computer, we want you to have some foundational knowledge just so you can stop and ask questions before you do something that may introduce risk to the company. So that's the biggest one. I think the second one is just the keeping up with the pace of change, whether it be with patches that are constantly coming out for software or equipment, and just the changing landscape of what attacks look like, and how they're pulled off. So there's a constant challenge to keep up with the activity required to secure an organization, but also the knowledge required, you know, and the ability to adapt to everything changing so quickly, and understanding what may or may not pose a risk to your organization.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So as computer scientists, we always want to fix stuff, right? The technology is broken, let's make it better. It's so much easier to fix technology than it is to fix people. And I think you're absolutely right. Number one vulnerability often is the human compound in the information system. Christos, what do you think?
I completely agree with those 2 points. I always say the human element is going to be the weakest point in the chain, right? And education goes a very long way, but it can only go so far, right? As humans, we are prone to error and misconfigurations, and that's ultimately what leads to a breach, right? So really staying ahead of that is a big piece. You know, for me personally, you know, we work to protect critical infrastructure workloads and really big corporations, right? These corporations and this infrastructure is constantly under attack, you know, nation state attacks, state sponsored attacks. Staying ahead of that, you know, when they're not playing by rules and we have to, is very difficult. You know, so really just staying up to date on the threat landscape, trying to stay as close or ahead as you possibly can of these attacks is key, right? I personally get briefed by the NSA and the CISA organization on a weekly basis, and I can't disclose a lot, obviously, but there are attacks coming from every single angle you could possibly imagine. You know, so being proactive is, you know, it's a challenge in itself being proactive, excuse me, trying to stay ahead of this. But, you know, I feel if you do it right and you plan well and you build, you know, foundational components to your program, you can be successful. But really staying ahead of the curve is the biggest challenge, right? There's really no rules in this game.
No, absolutely. It's definitely an adversarial discipline. Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with all the points. I kind of almost on the flip side of that, I see with regards to kind of people hurdles. I think, especially in my current role now, you know, oftentimes we're kind of the, you know, last line of defense, where we're often, you know, clients often come to us, you know, with an urgent need for getting up to speed in the market, whether that be, you know, a need for upgrades of technology or some sort of implementation to kind of help protect them from a security standpoint, whether that's, you know, mandated by government, they, you know, didn't pass some sort of assessment or something, things like that. And one of our biggest challenges is, you know, helping companies and clients get up to speed in a timely manner, but also ensuring that we're providing, the right protection, not just to meet a requirement or something like that, but to kind of put safeguards in place for leaders and companies in the future, from kind of our perspective as well.
And I think that is a very important last comment you made there. It's go past the checkbox, right? It's
Exactly.
being secure and being in compliance with whatever audit standards or guidelines there are not the same things.
Yeah,
absolutely. And as Christos mentioned, be aware. We always have to be keeping up on what's happening in the world around us. We call it threat intelligence with a fancy term, but it's basically the same thing. Know what's happening in the world and see how it applies to you. Absolutely. Okay, so we know what the challenges are. We know what each of you does and your organizations. Let's put those together and say, working through these challenges in the different industries and organizations that we're working with, we're always learning lessons. What do you think is the biggest lesson that you've learned? And let me turn the sequence around. Kelly, I'll start with you this time.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest lessons I learned, kind of coming off the same statement, is that organizations need to be really adaptable to just emerging cyber and technology risk. And I think this applies to companies of all sizes. I think having worked at 2 really large companies, I've seen, really comprehensive sort of cyber protections in place and employee trainings, but I've also worked with clients at my prior job who, kind of have a smaller employee base that also really need to, be adaptable to, emerging technologies and risks. I was looking at some of the thought leadership that our company had posted on cybersecurity recently, actually, and there was a survey that EY did of about 500 C-suite executives. And what I found really surprising was only 42% of them said they felt that they were well equipped to deal with a cyber attack, which is extremely surprising to me, given how much money some companies spend on programs and assessments to, still feel unprepared for a threat.
Yeah. And as much as that is maybe a shocking number, it's not necessarily a surprising number, because you can only prepare for what you know, right? And so there's so much that we don't know yet that's still facing us. Christos, what about your thoughts on this? What are the biggest lessons you think?
Yeah, listen, for me, I think my biggest lesson learned throughout my career is that this is a team sport, right? Meaning it requires buy-in from the top down, meaning from the C-suite all the way down, and they need to be on board with all of your initiatives, right? In order for you to act quickly, get proper investments and alignment, it starts at the top, right? It starts with, your CEO, your CFO, your CISO, your CIO, all working together and understanding here are the threats that this business faces, right? Communicating that risk up and saying, here's what we're going to do for that. We need to move quick and we need to get our tools and our processes in place. The only way that happens is if it starts from the top and that mission is dictated downwards and everybody buys in. Honestly, if you're not doing that, I think that's a recipe for disaster for almost any organization. I've been involved in a number of incidents over the years, and it's very clear the ones that typically get hit the most are the ones where they don't have proper investment, they don't have proper buy-in from the top down, and it becomes a much larger issue, down the road.
Couldn't agree more. Barbara.
So I think one of the most eye-opening things over the last couple of years has been how the dark web and Bitcoin have changed the game. It's now a lot easier for people to not even, figure out how to do it themselves. They can go to the dark web and they can find blueprints on how to attack, systems. And Bitcoin allows them to do this, anonymously and get paid for it. There are some ways that this is starting to get, cracked down on, but it's not fast enough. So I think that's been a huge game changer. I have a friend who owns a small business services firm, 3 or 4 people. Their work isn't terribly interesting. It's not the kind of stuff you'd want to steal. There's no value for a hacker to steal that information. So for all these years, they thought they were safe from hackers. What do hackers want with us? We don't have credit card information. You know, they're not going to get anything valuable from us. Well, what every organization has is the need to keep their stuff accessible and private. So if they have customer information, specifically if they, or especially if they have any sort of healthcare information, you know, if they get breached, you know, they can very easily be held for ransom, and the hacker can say, you know, pay us $1 million in Bitcoin, or we're going to tell all your customers that we stole all their information. You know, at this point, anyone who's over 21 has probably received some sort of alert from some financial services firm that their information has been stolen, and they're now being offered, you know, free credit protection. It's because of these types of things. So, you know, big name companies or companies that really rely on their reputation, like some smaller firms, they don't want to be known that, you know, their systems were insecure enough that this could easily happen. It damages their relationships and quite honestly could really potentially kill their business.
Absolutely. And I think what I'm hearing from everyone is that very often cybersecurity is seen as a technical discipline, but it is so much more than that. Technical is an important part of it, of course. That's sometimes even, you know, the base level, but there is so much more. There is a whole management layer that needs to be worried about. There is so much more that goes into securing an entire organization and its assets, both the physical as well as the non-tangible assets. And cybersecurity plays a role in that. Fortunately, that's changing. We're seeing that. For example, the US federal government, through the National Institute for Standards and Technologies, are starting to issue really, really strong guidance on what good and maybe even best practices are going to be. And I'm hoping that will start evolving in the way where the cybersecurity field isn't necessarily driven by technology, but technology is, of course, still an important aspect of it. I think the point we made, Barbara, that everyone is a target is absolutely true, and that's because all information is valuable, right? It might be valuable to you, it might not be valuable to someone else, but anything that is valuable to you, I can hold ransom. That's the whole principle of ransomware. And of course, business interruption and reputational damages are also things that most organizations are willing to pay to avoid, and criminals know that. So absolutely. Let's change pace again. And this time, Christos, I think I'm going to start with you. What are you most tired of hearing on cybersecurity? And what would you say about that so you would never have to answer it again?
I can't begin to tell you how many meetings I've had with CIOs, and the question that comes up is, are we secure? It is the most vague question that does not have a good answer, right? And I always answer it the same, right? It's, I can never say yes with 100% confidence that we are secure, right? You know, my answer, and it's almost like back of the napkin response at this point is, you know, we take all reasonable actions and necessary precautions to secure the organization, but it's changing constantly, right? You know, the threat landscape, you know, changes on a daily basis, you know, and it requires transformation and agility to keep up. You know, I think, I don't know, I'm sure we all saw the news these past couple of weeks with MGM, you know, being in the news and them losing about 20 to 30 million a day because their slot machines were unavailable, right? This is a company that invests hundreds of millions of dollars a year into their cybersecurity program, and they were breached because one person, you know, due to a broken process from a help desk call, right? So to sit there and ask the question, are we secure? It's an impossible question to answer, and it's one that's nearly impossible to answer with confidence, right? So that's always been the way I secured it. That's a question that's been driving me crazy almost my entire career. Yeah.
Yes, at best you could say secure enough.
Exactly.
Barbara.
So for me, the question I get asked the most often, I was actually asked it this morning, is this email legit? You know, and it amazes me, you know, that, you know, still so many people just don't even know the basics of how to try and spot whether or not an email is legit. In this one in particular, it had a logo from the United States Postal Service on it, but you looked at the return address and it said something about like parcel something, whatever. But it clearly wasn't the post office. The post office would send you email from the post office. So I think that goes back to what I was saying before about, the users being, the biggest vulnerability for organizations when it comes to cybersecurity. Still, just trying to figure out how to educate them more so that they can identify these things on their own. We actually are using a service that implements with Outlook, which is our mail service, and allows users to report that they feel an email is suspicious, and then it goes to a specialized team in our IT group that will look at it and decide whether or not it's safe or not. So users are getting better at it, but that's still a real big thing that happens all way too often.
It sounds very familiar. So we've heard from Barbara, who's basically internal to an organization, from Christos, who primarily plays in the area of technology providers. Kelly, what about service providers and consultancy? How would you answer the question of what are you most tired of being asked about cybersecurity?
Yeah, kind of the flip side of kind of what Christos said, more or less clients who kind of come to us and say, what else do we need to be compliant? Or, are we good? Are we protected? And to that, I would usually say, we, coming on the consultant side, like we can't just isolate and look at one thing. We need to kind of take a look at like all of your vulnerabilities rather than what is just the kind of the checkbox that we were talking about earlier. And I think at the root of it is, understanding their employees, like what are your employee accesses like, and how are you managing those kind of controls and more secure items in your database, and making sure that those type of things aren't vulnerable to being breached at all by whether it's someone internal or external, some things like that.
Excellent, thank you. So in the lead up to today's event, we did brainstorm a little bit, and we wrote down a bunch of questions that we would like the panelists to talk about. The next question is what processes and systems do we put in place to manage or minimize cybersecurity threats? But I think we're hearing them throughout the conversation come up, right? So a lot of it has to do not necessarily with the technical products, but with educating the people in your organization. So maybe instead of asking about processes and systems, I'll turn it around a little bit and ask, what guiding principles do you think should govern a true security plan? And I'll start with what I think we use often here at Adelphi, and that is, if you don't keep it, you can't lose it. So in other words, don't collect what you don't need, and as soon as you don't need it anymore, get rid of it. Barbara, what do you think? What is one of those guiding principles that makes a lot of sense to you?
Yeah, no, that's a very good one. And we actually have been running in parallel with that concept because of privacy, right? So you've got GDPR over in Europe, and we do a lot of business in Europe. They're really aggressive with their stance on privacy. And because of that, we were forced to take a hard look at all of our data and say, why are we collecting certain things? How long are we keeping it? How long should we keep it, or do we have to? And when can we, encrypt it or purge it or whatnot? How long does it live in backups? We've done some really deep dives on that. So that's a very that's a really important piece of it. I think just from a 50,000 foot view. And you kind of touched on this earlier, Case. What is important to the business? Well, what's important to the business certainly is our data, but also making sure we maintain operations. So, what could take our website down? What could disrupt our back office network and take our warehouses offline, right? So we're constantly looking at things from that perspective to see, what else could happen that we haven't prepared for. But again, as everyone has said on this call so far, you're never done. This is constantly, an evolving practice where things are changing. There's new, approaches and threats all the time. So you have to continually revisit this on a regular, basis, and make sure that you're covering all your bases.
Excellent. And as an educator myself, I like when you say we are never done, because when you say that it's never done, it means that there is always work. And when there is always work, there will always be great careers. So keep that in mind as you think about cybersecurity as a potential field in which you might want to work. Christos, what do you think is maybe the most overarching principle on which you base your advice and your practices?
I mean, there's really two things, right? And forget about all the technical controls for a second. I think to echo what Barbara said, it's understanding what is the biggest risk to your business, identifying those critical assets, those critical workloads, what's going to keep your business operational, and what do you really need to focus on in order to build your program. From there, you kind of layer on all the base technical controls and kind of the administrative process around that. But without understanding what is it you're trying to protect, minimizing that threat, that attack surface, you're really you're just throwing darts and hoping that they stick, right? So really understanding what are the core competencies that the business needs to deliver to stay operational is key, right? I used to be at a company called Nature's Bounty, over here in Long Island, and for us, we were a manufacturing company, right? So making sure that our warehouse was operational, our distribution was in check. We were more worried about that than a simple, perhaps like an attack on our website, right? That we're not hosting any private information, right? So it really kind of depends on the business itself, and understanding what's critical and what's important to stay operational is foundational to that.
Kelly.
Yeah, I think something that kind of comes to mind initially is just being aware of kind of who, what, and where you're kind of sharing and talking about sensitive private matters with, whether that's data or talking about just confidential topics. I recently was doing a training where there was a lot of personal and company related data that was shared over a mobile device that wasn't company approved. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of headlines in the news about it, where one of our clients was impacted, where private information was leaked and it was obtained by people who shouldn't have, because people weren't sharing the right information over the right types of platforms. And basically what I'm trying to say is, don't take it offline when it's coming to your company's data. Don't talk about it in a area that's not part of the, whether that's your team site, Skype, or Outlook. Don't take it offline and try and complicate things by potentially exposing yourself and things like that. And I think I try to keep that in line with my personal type of security life as well as my job one as well.
And I think that's an excellent observation there, where everything we do professionally, we should also be doing in our personal lives. And everything has value. And it just depends on, does someone pick up on that? So that's excellent advice. Okay, so we have all of these thoughts, practices, and notice that we are now, about 40 minutes in, and we haven't talked really about technology yet. We haven't talked about firewalls. We haven't talked about any of the typical things that people associate with cybersecurity, and that's because those have really become commoditized in a way. The technology is important. It's also pretty good at the moment, but it goes well beyond what we do. However, sometimes things do go wrong. So examples of cybersecurity hacks, breaches, compromises, however you want to call them, that either you encountered or that you think are extraordinarily memorable and applicable to your discipline. Barbara, what comes to mind?
Yeah, Christos brought up the MGM situation, and I wanted to touch on that as well, because I think that's an interesting case study. So apparently earlier this year, I think earlier this summer, Caesars also suffered a breach. Now, they didn't report it initially. It apparently was not disruptive because, it didn't disrupt gaming. It didn't disrupt their hotel operations. It wasn't known until they filed an SEC filing on their updated financials, because they're a publicly traded company. That's when people realized that this had happened. So this whole thing, what happened and was resolved without any disruption to their customers. Now, they did say in the filings, there's a chance that customer data could have been, lost, and it's not, they've taken, I think the way they put it was they've taken steps to ensure that data is not, further distributed, but they can't be guaranteed of that. So basically, in short, they paid the ransom, which is what a lot of companies do. Now, on the flip side, you look at MGM. MGM was largely out of business for 10 days while they tried to figure out how to get the attackers out of their network and how to secure everything. There was, havoc. Not only was, their slot machines down, their hotel operations were down. They couldn't manage their bookings, and they couldn't check people out of their rooms. I mean, it was really it was chaotic. They lost, millions of dollars daily because of this, but then they also lost $2 billion in market cap because of this. So this is a very interesting, parallel between these two organizations and the way they addressed the situation or handled the situation differently. And at least in the short term, had very different outcomes. We'll see down the road, if that Caesars information gets distributed and there's a lot of ill effects, then there may still be blowback on Caesars. But for right now, it looks like Caesars won in the way they handled it.
That's a sobering thought, that it's often cheaper just to pay the ransom and better business than it is to actually do what often people consider the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Christos, you're ready to jump in, I can tell.
Yeah, I'm under NDA, so I can't disclose too much about a lot of the stuff I've seen. At a high level, though, I've seen $200 million plus companies go completely out of business because they weren't prepared. The threat is very real, and it does exist. And these two companies were portfolio companies within one single private equity group under a single fund that happened within 6 months of each other. Right, so it was really bad, right? And if you look at the source of the attack, it was done through social engineering, someone giving away a password, logging in on VPN. They didn't have, proper network segmentation in place, no backups, no nothing. And overnight, they quickly realized, even by paying the ransom, one of them did pay the ransom. They weren't able to decrypt. It kind of, screwed up their entire configuration across the board. They couldn't recover, and they closed the doors within a week. It's a very, very real threat out there, and it's very hard to take seriously if you don't go through it. Unfortunately, I've seen the ugly side of it. I think a couple of us have on this call. It's a very real thing out there. It can completely shut down a business and impact a lot of people.
I think that's a great segue to Kelly, maybe more so to your past life than your current life, because when things go wrong, that's when the insurance claims start coming in, right? So cyber breach insurance is a real thing. It's hard to get payouts, but when you do get them, they might just be the one thing that saves your company. What breaches or incidents come to mind, Kelly, that say, yeah, they really influenced my thinking about the field?
Yeah, I think the most common one that we saw, especially for the kind of small to mid-sized companies, not the super massive ones, was a lot of social engineering type of breaches where a lot of times there were people who were not employed by the company or posing as a supplier, perhaps emailing, people in charge of money. So, a CFO or things like that, asking for a wire payment or a bill was overdue. And what you're technically supposed to do is, verify with that person before you kind of release the payment. But a lot of times what we saw happening in some of these smaller companies with more or less separation of duties in place, they weren't verifying and just kind of saying, oh, we forgot to submit this payment. We're going to just wire the money to this person. And it was often hackers that were benefiting from this. And I can't even tell you how many times we've seen claims of people doing it multiple times for up to a year. And, that loss could sum up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, even if it's a few payments, but it's happening for so long because companies and employees themselves aren't verifying with vendors or, people or suppliers that they're using.
And those losses, like you said, they're often maybe small at the individual level, but they do add up in the end. They
accumulate.
Very often not covered by breach insurance, or you don't reach that threshold where it becomes interesting to take advantage of it.
So we would sell, for people who felt that they were really exposed to that type of risk, like a separate sub-limit almost to cover those type of losses, because, you know, companies that, you know, more in the manufacturing space, things like that, that might deal with those type of clients more, we're way more susceptible to false, you know, false employees and things like that.
And it comes back to people again, right? Social engineering is just the manipulation of people and their expectations. Okay, we're at about 12:45 at the moment. It's about time that we're going to invite the audience to start thinking about questions that they may have for the panelists. And if you wouldn't mind, start to type those up in the chat window. I would appreciate it. We'll get to those in a moment. In the meanwhile, I will have a couple more questions while the questions are being collected and tabulated. So 1989, which is, you know, prehistoric in terms of cybersecurity. And there was a book called The Cuckoo's Egg. That is what got me going on cybersecurity. It's a fantastic book about a system administrator who was trying to solve some accounting discrepancies, and in the process basically rolls up a spy ring operating out of Eastern Europe. And what's interesting with that story is that well, first of all, it's very well told, but it really goes through the process that he followed to identify what happened and who was behind it. And it really leads to today what we call DFIR, digital forensics and incident response. Unfortunately, 1989, you know, that's not just last decade, that's last century. You could even go so far as to say the last millennium. That book is still 95% applicable today. The technologies may have changed a bit, but the methods and techniques have not. And that's kind of a sobering thought that we haven't really made that much progress in, what, 40 plus years? What do the panelists believe is the greatest advancement or innovation made in the realm of cybersecurity ever? Barbara.
I say it's artificial intelligence, and I think we're at the very early stages of it. You know, there is no way humans are going to win this battle. You know, it's just moving too fast. There's too much to look at. Companies aren't, you know, small companies aren't going to be able to spend tens of millions just securing themselves, you know. So I think artificial intelligence it's already out there. And I think the continued evolution of what we can do with artificial intelligence is going to, you know, help us be more successful in fighting this battle.
Excellent. Kelly?
Yeah, I think kind of going along the same theme of artificial intelligence, I would say in terms of being used a little bit more today is I think blockchain technology is really important and a great innovation that's really helped increase the level of security for data storage and data sharing for a lot of companies.
Christos?
There's been a lot, right? There's been a lot of advancement over the past 10 to 15 years. I think, you know, if I had to put, I don't think there's one single one that I would really point out. I think ultimately, you know, thinking about where we went from the traditional antivirus world where it was all signature based, you protect against what's known versus the new EDR tools with cloud-based monitoring and 24/7 operations and proactive threat hunting. To me, that's probably the biggest advancement that I've seen from a product perspective. You know, it helps you stay a little bit more proactive and stay ahead of the threats. But honestly, there's been so many advances in this world, you know, thinking about zero trust architecture, network segmentation, cloud-based, cloud alone, right? Cloud is a whole other brand new genre that's, you know, continuing to innovate. So, you know, for me, EDR tools, the CrowdStrikes, the SentinelOnes of the world, I think changed the game. And I think we're starting to build on that. Artificial intelligence is only going to continue to strengthen that for both sides, though, for the good guys and the bad guys. So staying up on that side of the house, I think is super important and is going to define us moving forward.
Yes, oh, absolutely. That is definitely a future for learning as much as you can about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Unfortunately, so are the bad guys. You know, they're also using these technologies, and that's the disadvantage, of course, for all, let's call it, weaponized technologies. It can be used for good and for nefarious purposes alike. So knowing what plays in the world is absolutely a very important element, and AI, machine learning, is a big one. Some questions are coming in, so let's start there. what prepared you the most for the position that you are currently in? And whoever wants to take it, go right ahead. Barbara.
I'll jump in if you like it. Sorry,
Barbara, want to unmute by by a second.
Listen, I would say for me, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I think what prepared me the most was really, honestly, just having a passion for the topic. You know, not just making it a 9 to 5, but really making it something that I enjoy doing and investing my time outside of work learning. To me, you know, this is in this field specifically. I think having that passion, you know, to kind of go back to the beginning of our conversation, having that passion to learn and continue to grow is what's going to prepare you the most. That's what's helped me, at least.
Okay, Barbara.
Yeah, so this goes back to my introduction. So I have no problem admitting my age. I'm 54 years old, and as was mentioned earlier on, I'm in my final semester of a master's degree in cybersecurity. I am continually learning, and you know, what don't I know? What am I not strong enough in? You know, what do I want to know more about so I can make better decisions and you know, lead my teams better. So I wouldn't, you know, when you say better prepared, it's an ongoing journey. It's constantly changing, and you know, I think just being flexible. I think that was mentioned earlier. I think Kelly mentioned that. Just being flexible, because the world around me is changing, and if I'm not changing, also, it's gonna move right past me.
Kelly.
Yeah, I would say, as someone who kind of more or less a little bit fell into the cybersecurity kind of insurance space, I think just, you know, as I was learning more about it in my own career path, I think just staying up to date on things in the news. And I mean, now in my current role, we kind of have to stay up to date. You know, we're kind of seen as thought leaders in these type of spaces, and just, you know, subscribing to different types of news articles, things like that, that kind of might pique your interest in the cyber realm or technology space, just to kind of continually, you know, educate yourself on what's new and what's upcoming, and having those good talking points to bring up in conversation as you're kind of like navigating a career, whether that be in cyber or elsewhere.
Yeah, my answer to the question would be curious, and then give in to that curiosity. You know, try things, ask questions of people who likely have answers, and do what you're doing now. You know, attend these events, go places, and just be part of the social fabric around the cybersecurity field. So absolutely. Now, we're all talking with people around the table here, the virtual table, that work for relatively large and somewhat well-off companies. But if you're a small business, what can you do to protect yourself if you don't have significant funds for intelligent briefings or advanced dedicated staff, etc.? Are there things you can do, or is it just hope for the best and you know, go for it?
I can answer this one pretty quickly. Yeah. Not to give a sales pitch here, but for most people who would purchase a cybersecurity insurance policy, you are usually offered a lot of policyholder advantages. So a lot of things that my company would provide are, we provide all purchasers, you know, with password encryption services through a company called Dashlane that helps companies kind of secure their passwords and change them on a monthly basis. And we even provided some free, really basic but employee trainings for small businesses who were interested, to kind of, you know, take the burden off of them of having to train their employees themselves, and just kind of give like companies and employees an overview of things that they can look into. So we provide a lot of those like small type of services that often help the smaller company without the funds kind of keep themselves protected, and also pay for the insurance protection as well.
Thank you. Christos, Barbara, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say for me, there's a variety of options out there, right? And, you know, depending on the size of the company and your budget, there's a number of different ways you can go. You know, I always say start from the basics, right? Protect your endpoints, protect your identities, and kind of build on there, right? If you've done that, proceed on to the next. Make sure you have proper backups in place. There's a lot of free tools out there that can help support a lot of these things where you don't have to break the bank, and you'll get some level of protection. You know, as you start to get bigger and bigger, and your program gets a little more robust, there's full service companies out there that can, manage your entire security posture for you if you want. There's a lot of different ways to go, right? But I would say start small, build, make sure you're budget focused, and just kind of go from there, right? Just do the basics right, and that would stop about 75 to 80% of attacks in their tracks.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'll add in, so I agree with, Kelly and Christos, there's service providers out there, there's tools out there. One of the thing I think can be very helpful, especially for smaller businesses, is to network with other small businesses, right? So talk to the leaders in similar, or, people in similar roles in those companies, because they're having the same challenges that you are. And by networking and having those conversations, you can find out how they're solving them, and get some firsthand feedback on, what, good service providers are out there and what good tools are out there that can help them.
I think that's an excellent point. We do this in higher education, for example. Of course, we are competing with other colleges around us, but we're not competing on security. So we talk to each other all the time, share thoughts, share ideas. Shared intelligence is always better. And I think from my perspective, the thing would be is know your limitations. If you know that you're not a technology-focused company, hire someone else to do the technology if you really need it. Leave it to the professionals. Let's see what we have in the questions. How has the issue of people working in cybersecurity has been dealt with? And hasn't this led to multiple layoffs? If so, hasn't this scared individuals who would like to join the cyber industry? I'll start maybe with a quick comment on that. It is true that technology has seen a good amount of layoffs over the last number of months. However, I don't think it's a net decrease in employment. Some of the very large companies have been downsizing, but all of those people who have lost those jobs are scooped up right away by small and medium-sized companies that have need for that same expertise just as much. Cybersecurity in particular has a huge labor deficit. If you're passionate about working in the field, you will find a job in the field. And notice that I said passionate, I didn't necessarily say you have to be having the deepest level of technical knowledge, although that does help. So people aren't necessarily, I think in this particular case, the security people that we're talking about. It's people who just are regular employees through the organization. So I don't think necessarily that's a reason to be scared of working in the field. Barbara, Kelly, Chris, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I just read an article yesterday, and I read so many business and trade publications. I don't remember which one it was in, but they basically said, all the layoffs that happened earlier this year, like that, it essentially slowed to zero in September. And I think you're going to start to see, that deficit number grow again. I think part of what happened over the last 18 months, and really in the last 12 months, these companies came out saying, oh, we do AI everything. And they oversold what they were capable of doing. And when they weren't able to deliver, those smaller companies started to fold and those people were displaced. So yes, you had a lot of big people at big companies, get laid off. And I think that was due to a lot of overgrowth, possibly be, disrupted by COVID and things like that. But in the cybersecurity space, I think there were people who were displaced because their companies just, couldn't compete well in the market. But as you said, Case, those people get scooped up pretty quickly.
Yep. I'm keeping an eye on the clock, so we are scheduled to stop in pretty much less than a minute at this point. I think the final question should be Rahul's question. What advice should we give to students who want to be safe from any attacks? And I'm going to extend that with what advice would you give students who are considering a career in this field? Christos.
I have 3 kids, right? And I think the one thing that they don't understand are the dangers of social media and how it pertains to cybersecurity. I advise everyone be very, very careful of what you're disclosing on social media, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, the whole 9. There's not the people that are taking advantage are not good people. They're mining data, they're using it to their advantage. Be very protective of yourself and your personal information because they will be used in social engineering attacks. That's the number one A1A advice I give to everybody that I speak to. Outside of that, like I said, take care of yourself, protect your passwords, rotate them out, leverage multi-factor authentication for everything, and just be as careful as you possibly can with your own information.
Thank you. Kelly.
Yeah, I think kind of coming off that point too, just being very self-aware of how you kind of see yourself as a contributor to overall cyber safety, whether that's using a network at a university or your personal network at home. Just being mindful that as a singular person, like you make up thousands and thousands of clicks and emails a day that one wrong one can kind of turn things kind of wayside for a lot of other people, and just being mindful of kind of that. And just in terms of your career and progressing like that, being open-minded to there's a lot of avenues that cybersecurity can take you through, and kind of there's not just a very traditional path. So keep an open mind. There's a lot of alternative opportunities, and definitely companies continue to grow and evolve and emerge. Boston's a big tech hub, so there's always a ton of new emerging companies there regarding the cyberspace. So it's super interesting, and I'm excited to see kind of where it takes us in the next few years.
Amen. Barbara.
So unless you're, willing to give up all your technology and devices and live in a cabin in the mountains, I think the next best option is just to be really super critical about all of your, dealings with technology. So, is this email real? Do I really need to post this on social media? What could happen? What could somebody do with this information on social media? So I think that's, those are all, good things to keep in mind. The other thing, I was going to say is, as far as a career choice, I think this is a super hot field, and it's going to be, back in the mid and late 90s, people who understood the internet, they were gods in their company. They knew how to do this magic, and now the internet is everywhere in every company. It's just part of being in business. And that's what's happening with cybersecurity. It's part of being in business. It's a requirement of being in business. Unless you're, a landscaping company and you have no technology, no website or anything like that, and you don't manage your books, with technology. So I think this is a field that's just going to continue to grow, and threats are continuing to grow. So opportunities are going to continue to grow as well.
Thank you. Well, with that, I would like to thank all the speakers for their insights. Thank you for the audience for being here today and being active participants. Before we close out, one final announcement. The next Dawn Center speaker session series will take place, same place, same time, online in November. We hope you will join us then. And with that, thank you everyone, and have a great day.